The solemnity of the Most Holy Trinity is probably the most confusing and, I would say, paradoxical of any of our liturgical celebrations throughout the year. It's confusing even in the language of the liturgy. You kind of hear it in the prayers that we use throughout this liturgy. We talk about one supreme Godhead and three distinct persons, equal in majesty. But more than this paradox of three persons being one God, it's the paradox of this great, mysterious, infinite being who bothers with us at all. I mean, this is what makes this feast so beautiful and so personal, that God even bothers at all. We have in God a being who is infinite in power and limitless in capabilities, yet becomes a fragile child in the womb of a teenage Jewish girl. We have in God love itself, love in perfection without end, and yet he surrenders himself into the hands of torturers and godless people for whom he gives his life. We have in God uninhibited beauty and goodness, and yet, as the prophet Isaiah says, he is so marred beyond that of mortals that his appearance is beyond anything we've ever seen. He became despised and rejected, bruised by the sin that he never committed. This is the great paradox of God. Not just that he's a mystery beyond human comprehension, but that this omnipotent being would even care one iota about us. As the great poet Charles Péguy wrote, "A God, my friend, God bothered himself. God sacrificed himself for me." And that is Christianity. How easy it would be for God not to bother himself, or to just snap his fingers like Thanos in the Avengers and annihilate humanity, or like the Death Star in Star Wars and just wipe out the entire earth. How easy it would be for God to do that. It would take nothing for him to do that, and it would be hard for us to argue our case. But God has not done that. He has not done that. He's done, in fact, the opposite. He hasn't moved away from us or disowned us or kicked us out of the house, so to speak. Instead, he has come closer. He's come among us. We don't have a distant, ambiguous God. We have a God who is near to us, a God who is so close, who can't stay away from us, his creatures, even as fallen as we are. And for God, this is a natural move because God is love. But for us, it's completely unnatural. When we're associated with someone who's done wrong, just look at any second grade classroom. You see any child who's done anything wrong, and immediately, no, it wasn't me, it was him. I wasn't even in the area. I was in the next room. I was in the bathroom. I don't even go to school here. I mean, we start to kind of distance ourselves from the criminal. We want to separate ourselves from the evildoer. But the Lord doesn't do this. He does the opposite. God goes into the prison with the prisoner. God allows himself to be condemned in order to accompany those who are justly condemned. You see how strange this is, that an all-powerful God who could wipe all those things away chooses not only not to wipe them away, but to enter into the punishment. In that first reading from the book of Exodus, Moses makes the second trip up Mount Sinai because the first time he went up, in less than a month, all the people turned to sacrificing things to this molten calf. And when Moses got to the bottom of the mountain, he was angry and he smashed the tablets on which God had written the law. So Moses goes back up the mountain so that God can do it again. And while he's there, he says to God, "Come along with us in our company." And this is is not some polite invitation. It'd be nice, God, if you walked along with us. That would be great to have you. Moses knows these people are a mess. For 30 days, they can't even remain faithful to the God who liberated them from slavery and fed them with the bread of angels in the desert and brought them quail so that they would stop complaining. And Moses says, come with us, because we can't do this without you. And it's true. We need a God who is near us, who comes along in our company. I've been thinking a lot about this. Tomorrow is my 18th anniversary of priesthood, and I'll tell you that I would not have made it a day without Christ. And I can't tell you how many times I've sat in the confessional listening to people pour their souls out and thinking to myself, I have no idea what I'm going to say. But even more, this desire in me to say to them, let me confess to you. Let me pour my heart out to you. It's amazing how often that happens, that I just recognize in the face of people just letting it all go, my desire is just as great and even greater, because I recognize what a terrible sinner I am. Or how many times I've said those words over the bread and wine in the consecration during the Eucharistic prayer. This is my body. This is my blood given up for you. And how often it happens that saying those words, I say to the Lord, I want the same. I want to give my body for these people. I want to pour out my blood for these people. And yet I'm so incapable of doing it. And so stay with me and accompany me. Or how many times I've been at the end of my rope and someone out of nowhere offers a word of encouragement and support, and what a tremendous breath of fresh air it is. And I know it's not just me. I know that we all need the Lord in our midst, because we can't sustain our marriages. We can't sustain our life of prayer. We can't sustain any kind of coherence in our witness to the rest of the world. We can't sustain it. And so we need the Lord to remain with us, not just to remain, but to get even closer and closer and closer. And so let's not get caught in the snare of this idea of trying to understand God, because it's ridiculous. We never will. Instead, let's just allow the Lord to come close in whatever way God wants to do that. He is almighty and infinitely glorious, and yet he wants to become small. So small, in fact, in this Eucharist that we can receive him. And so let's embrace this all-powerful and exceedingly humble God who joins us on this path of faith and who calls us into his divine love.